Professional gymnastics is not just physically painful, but it can also have a mental and emotional toll on those participating in it. Gymnasts aren't always treated with the kindness and respect that they deserve, and that naturally gets into their heads sometimes. In this video, we'll talk about all the times gymnasts were disrespected. Let's get into it. At number 6, we have Kerri Strug. American gymnast Kerri Strug competed in the 1996 Summer Olympics as her team's finalist, and she made history when she won, but with the ultimate twist. Replaying the events of that evening, Strug was seen tentatively going in for a vault after her teammate made a poor one and gave the entire team a poor average. The pressure must have been real because Strug under-rotated, fell and injured her ankle. She was in severe pain. But losing was not an option for Strug that day, even with a sprained ankle. She made that second attempt at a vault, trying her best to land on her feet to be able to win. When she made a high score, she fought back tears of pain and tried to smile as hard as she could. But the saddest thing about it all was that she didn't even need that second vault. It's true that her first attempt yielded a score of 9.162, and the combined low score of the teammate who went before her gave the US a lowered average. However, her competitors that night weren't their strongest selves either, and before a second vault was even needed, the US had already come on top. So why did Strug bear all that pain to make a second attempt that wasn't even needed? Turns out that during this time interval between the two vaults that Strug made, she actually asked her teammate if that second vault was even needed, but she was told that she just had to do it for the gold, that she had no other choice. She thus limped back onto the court and subjected herself to even more torture for a win that was guaranteed anyway. Her injury was so serious that she couldn't compete in the following events. Other gymnasts took her place in the all-around, the vault final, and the floor final. Though that second vault was nationally praised later on, not much attention was paid to her suffering during the event, which is to this day sounds very disrespectful to a gymnast her caliber. Next at number 5 is Sam Mikulak. This happened back in 2016 during the 9th day of the Rio Olympics. While Brazilian gymnasts Mariano and Hipólito were cheered on by the crowd for routines that put them in medal positions, others weren't treated with as much enthusiasm even when they performed even better. The crowd that day booed whoever competed against those they supported. Britain's Max Whitlock attracted crowds' boos as their routine placed him ahead of his Brazilian opponents, but at least they didn't boo during his routine. The one who received the worst of the crowd's moods was American gymnast Sam Mikulak. Japan's Kenzo Shirai came before Mikulak, and the crowd got disrespectful to the point where they cheered each time he made a poor landing or didn't overall perform well. Little did Mikulak know, a little uneasy as he was seeing the treatment of his Japanese opponent at the hands of the crowd, that it would all just peak when he'd step out. The arena filled up with cheers of Mikulak's opponent's name as the crowd took delight at each of his missteps. They chanted Brazil and Diego and got wilder and wilder as the routine progressed. Following the event, Twitter was filled up with reactions to the crowd's behavior. People termed it disgusting and disrespectful. About the fans' behavior, Mikulak said, "Yeah, I got pretty rattled. They really wanted their country to win, and that's what the crowd is there for." Now for number 4 is Gabby Douglas. This one also took place during the 2016 American gymnast Gabby Douglas received heat for something she says she's proud of herself for doing. She was part of Team USA for that year's Olympics and brought her second victory home. But as she stepped onto her third Olympic podium, she forgot to do something her other teammates did that day. And that was to place her hand on her heart as the American national anthem played. Critics were quick to take to social media to bring Douglas down. They called the move a disrespectful and unpatriotic one. Douglas decided to respond with an apology and clarified that she was in fact overwhelmed by the events of the night and offending anyone was far from her intention. She said, "In response to a few tweets I saw tonight, I always stand at attention out of respect for our country whenever the national anthem is played. Never meant any disrespect and apologize if I offended anyone. I'm so overwhelmed at what our team accomplished today and overjoyed that we were able to bring home another gold for our country." When her statement came out, people couldn't help but point out just how disrespectful it was for people to call called Douglas out on something they weren't even completely informed about, but also not appreciating for the medal she'd brought for the country. Instead of appreciating her on her second major victory at the Olympics, all the fans noticed was how her hand wasn't on her heart during the national anthem. Gymnastics fans truly don't know how to act at times. Next at number 3, Simone Biles. Another one from the 2016 Olympics. Despite being one of the most accomplished female athletes from that year's Olympics, American gymnast Simone Biles was still subjected to disrespect and criticism. And surprisingly, this time, it was NBC sports commentator Al Trotwig. Trotwig's insensitive comments came on air and then on his Twitter. Biles was adopted by her maternal grandparents when she was a toddler. Biles was referred to them as her own parents during the many press interviews she's appeared in. For some reason, Trotwig thought it was his personal job to clarify that Biles' grandparents were in fact not her biological parents. He said that Biles' grandpa and quote-unquote his wife raised her, and she calls them mom and dad. Fans found these comments extremely rude and complained that Trotwig didn't have any purpose making them. They also objected to the fact that the veteran commentator had reduced Biles' grandmother, Nellie, to the role of being wife to Biles' grandfather. But Trotwig hadn't seemed to learn his lesson. He clarified via Twitter once again how Biles' grandfather and grandmother weren't her real mother and father. The tweet again received a lot of negative attention, and only then was Trotwig forced to delete it. But screenshots had been taken, and they quickly surfaced on the app to tell Trotwig that he wasn't getting off that easily. Soon NBC itself was forced to take action and made Trotwig apologize on air. Trotwig said that he didn't speak the right words and acknowledged how his remarks might have been hurtful to both the athlete and her grandparents. He also apologized to the fans for offending them. Now at number 2, we have Gabby Douglas and Simone Biles. When veteran sports commentator Al Trotwig made those remarks about Biles' adoptive parents, it wasn't the only time he disrespected the athlete. Trotwig had his phase where he was confusing gymnast Gabby Douglas and Simone Biles together. This was seen as incredibly racist on Trotwig's part, whose confusion was attributed to both the gymnasts being of African American descent. He didn't exactly address the situation, but seemed to have learned his lesson when he was thrashed on Twitter. He made sure to never do it again afterwards. It's possible that the confusion was completely unintentional, but it's also possible that he just didn't care enough about saying the right names for both the gymnasts. Some also came out to defend Trotwig, saying that his mistake was nothing personal and he might just have been genuinely confused. They linked the error to the commentator's age and reminded everyone that it was normal to make such mistakes when you have to work as hard as he does. They called for everyone to overlook Trotwig's mistake in judgment and to move on. And at number 1, Gabby Douglas. Again, 2016 was a particularly rough year for Gabby Douglas, and that's why she's been mentioned for the 3rd time on today's list. Apparently, Douglas took part in more than one unpatriotic move that season. Not only was she picked on for not having her hand on her heart during the finals day national anthem, but she was also criticized for sitting out her American teammates' routines while watching from the stands. An entire hashtag trend was started to bully Gabby at the time. But amid all this, many were also supportive of Gabby. They recognized how many of the things she was being called out for weren't entirely her fault. Some argue that the ones criticizing just needed a reason to take out their frustration on someone, a frustration they had for the areas the US wasn't as successful at during the 2016 Olympics. Needless to say, it was highly disrespectful how an entire hashtag trend bugging Douglas was started even when she brought gold for the country. That's it for today's video. What's your opinion on the whole Gabby Douglas fiasco? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to our channel where we post similar videos quite frequently. We'll see you in the next one.